That was a guy by the name of Halasz. And we don't know much about this guy, besides the fact that he loved playing an unusual opening for white, this one, and surprisingly he won pretty much all the games that he played in it. Moreover, it was correspondence chess, meaning his opponents had plenty of time to think. This got me curious and I decided to figure it out. It turned out that indeed, white has this pawn majority on the king side and he's always ready to push you forward, let's say when the knight comes out, and creates a lot of interesting attacking opportunities for you. Let me show you the main line first. In most cases, your opponents see that, this pawn is under the attack, and they want to defend it with their knight. You add one more attack with your knight, and they add one more defense with their bishop. After that, you kind of forget about this pawn, and you just develop casually. It turns out that although it's an extra pawn of black, but there is a downside as well. It actually blocks their own bishop, so the bishop becomes dull, and it doesn't do anything. It looks like a tall pawn. Moreover, if we continue going down this path, and let's say we just both sides develop casually, this is already a losing mistake for black, which is hard to believe, because it enables white to play e5, one of the main ideas besides having these two pawns, kick off this knight, and as it goes, we've got the Greek gift sacrifice bishop takes f7, which wins the game. So the king has to take, and after that, knight to g5. Perhaps you're aware of this tactical motif. If not, let me show you real quick what that is. So we deliver a check to the king, it's gotta go. And if it goes back, we just bring the queen out, threatening queen to h7 checkmate. The only way for black would be to try to escape with their king there, but then there is a forcing sequence which is worth remembering because it works across many different openings whenever you use this Greek gift sacrifice. Instead of going there, you take the pawn on f7, which is no longer defended by the rook. So you play queen takes, and after that you go back, so we keep delivering checks all the time, and we do it all the way till the checkmate. I'll show you some sidelines in a moment, like what to do if your opponent deviates from this main line. However, I also want to show you another main line, which is super cool because I found a god level move for you with 4 exclamation marks. And if you ever see Drunkenstein, which is the nickname of Carlsen, online, don't hesitate to challenge him and play this against him. So again, black goes for now with standard moves, but now they figure out that besides bishop c5, just defending this move, they can also play bishop b4, delivering check to your king. And this also seems like a very tempting move for black. Now, you just play c3, covering, and after this exchange, the good thing is that it helps you to develop your knight. In most cases, your opponent will take here, because if not, at some point in the future, you will probably jump there to d5 yourself and will counterattack this bishop, so they take it because the bishop has nothing else to do. Now, what can they do now? They don't really want to bring the knight out because there is always e5 chasing it back. So they play d6 first. We play bishop d3, basically same moves. They go knight f6, you castle. Now, as we already know, if your opponent carelessly castles, that enables you to play this e5, and as the knight goes, then bishop takes h7, the Greek gift sacrifice. This is a very common thing which works across many of these lines. So let's take it back. Instead, they often play bishop g4, trying to pin your knight, hoping that it will somehow slow down your attack and prevent you from jumping forward. However, now their king is still in the middle of the board, and you still want to push e5 and open up the lines and try to attack it. Now, of course, it's not a completely forced sequence, but I just want to show you something really, really beautiful here. Now, we attack the knight, all right? So what can they do? They can either go, or maybe they can try to taking advantage of the pin. In both cases, they're done. So let's say they go here. There's one line where you go bishop c4, attacking this knight twice. And the cool thing is that if the knight goes anywhere, let's say here or anywhere, you sack the bishop here on f7. That's another common tactics here. It calls the king out, and after that you continue with knight to g5, which is a check not only from the knight, but it's also a discover check from the rook. Now the king has to go, and after that, I'll give you 5 attempts to guess the right move for white here. Just pause the video and think about it. It's so beautiful, but I gotta tell you up front that it's a god level move, so if you don't find it, don't blame yourself, alright? It's very difficult. Now, of course, the most natural move to play for white would be queen takes g4. Just grabbing the bishop, the king is dead open, and you've got a winning position anyway. However, it's not like a force and win, because the game goes on. There is a move that wins the game on the spot. And I'm just keeping the intrigue, so I want you to really feel this, because, yeah, anybody can play queen g4. But the move that is the best move in the position is really difficult to spot. It's not the move queen g4, it's not queen b3, not any other attacking move. It's the move, ready? Rook f8. Which counts as a complete shocker. What the heck is going on here? Your queen's been attacked. You don't take it. You just give up the rook. For seemingly no reason. The rook does not even take anything. You just give it up, right? And the next variations are also very funny. So if queen takes, then you still don't take. You instead play queen b3 check. And although there are so many pieces of black that can stand on the way, one way or the other, like the knight can go here, the bishop can go, the queen can go, but you'll just capture them all. So that'll delay the checkmate a little bit, but that is still going to be a checkmate at the end, and black is defenseless, even though you only have 2 pieces into the attack, really. And the king seems to be surrounded by so many defenders. So that loses the game. Black is defenseless. Now let's take it back. What if black takes with the king? What's going to happen here? It's still not easy for white to figure out the winning blow, and it's a subtle move, queen to f1. It turns out that we vacated the square for the queen, and we reposition it to a better square, to an open file. And after the king goes somewhere, to g8 or e7, doesn't matter, here comes queen f7 checkmate. Finally, if black decides to be tricky, and they play knight takes c5, trying to capitalize on this pin, he uses a very rare tactical motif, a counter pin. So what you do here is you get away from this pin, while simultaneously putting the knight under the other pin. So you kind of, counter pin their knight while they try to pin your knight, if it makes any sense. And now black loses the game because you are going to grab the knight, either with a queen, with a check, or with a knight. Maybe the best they can do is to try to take here, so that they also take at least something, but then knight takes e5, and now you attack the queen, attack the bishop, and you set it up for all kinds of discovered checks on the next move. So if queen goes somewhere, you just take, let's say, knight takes g4 with check. If they try to cover, you still take here, and you still win the game. Because what can they do? They can't take with the knight, they'll drop the queen. If they try to take here, then you can take either of these pieces, let's say knight f6 first, check, which is important, and then rook takes e1 check, and at the end of the day, you've got an extra bishop and a completely winning position. Alright, now let me address the other line that your opponent may try playing here. Your opponent sees that you are going to take this pawn back with a queen, or maybe you're going to bring the knight out and grab it with a knight. Therefore, the way for black to completely overprotect this pawn so that you have no way to take it back is to play c5 themselves. And by the way, just a general note for all these lines, if you turn on Stockfish, it will very materialistically evaluate that black is up a pawn and will say that it is -1, because, 1 is a pawn in the computer's evaluation. So, very straightforward, up a pawn, -1. However, that doesn't mean anything. So if you look at the actual games of human beings, then white has a nice win rate here. And for example, the move f4 scores better for white compared to queen takes d4, which is the move that would be suggested by the computer normally, right? Just to take your pawn back. So it's very tricky, and don't just blindly trust to computer's evaluation. Computer sees the extra pawn, but for this pawn to matter, black's first needs to survive the attack and play perfectly during the next 20-30 moves and convert this extra pawn on endgame. But for most humans, that is a really difficult task, all right? So black goes c5, let's say they want to overprotect this pawn. And in this case, I'd recommend that you bring the bishop out to c4, not to d3. In most cases in this line, we bring it to d3, right? So, because we are kind of keeping it in an ambush, preparing for that Greek gift sacrifice later on. However, if they play c5, it weakens all these squares, and bishop c4 stands even better here, because black has no way to cover this diagonal, really. It's really difficult for them to play d5 now. And the bishop is doing a great job. Now, what can black do? And if they bring the knight out, there's always e5, feels unpleasant. So they usually play d6 first, trying to take control of the square. I mean, it doesn't really, but at least to some extent, black hopes that it's going to prevent it. Then you castle. And then again, black has some issues, because if they just try to develop somehow, there is not e5 still, there is knight g5, also kind of like the fried liver attack, and black is gone already. It's not easy. They may still try to play bishop g4, the move that lots of amateurs love so much. They think that it pins your knight and it is somewhat uncomfortable. But there is a tactical shot that we have seen in one of the previous variations, so I hope that you can find it on your own. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. It's the move bishop takes f7. In the god level variation, you remember, we used the same trick. But here is just very straightforward. King takes, knight to g5. And we deliver a check to the king. On the next move, we're going to pick up the bishop, and you ruin your opponent's position. The king is deadly exposed, and you just continue your attack. So that is it. Now, the fun fact about this position is that quite many of your opponents will figure out that, hey, this bishop is attacking the queen. So how about me just taking here, eliminating this knight, and, I take the knight, on the next move I take your queen, and I'm up material. That's a pretty good idea for black, generally speaking. However, in this particular case, after you take, they can't recapture your queen. Do you see why? Yes, because of this rook. Little rook standing in ambush. It delivers check to the king. It turns out they've got no time to grab your queen. They have to defend their king, have to move it. Now, no, they are going to take you. You're going to take them, with just an extra queen and a winning position. Now let me show you a few other common sidelines here. So after f4, your opponent goes knight c6, guarding the pawn. You attack it again. They go bishop c5. We play bishop d3, keeping our bishop in an ambush, getting ready for some sort of great gift sacrifices down the road. Now, what if your opponent does something else? Instead of just casual and careless development, which leads to this great gift indeed, what if they go d6? All right, and you castle, and now they go bishop g4. Now, your bishop is on d3, not on c4, so we don't have these tactics bishop takes f7. What do you do now? Well, first off, I got it. Like, I know that some of you guys will write in comments that no analysis can predict the silly stuff that my opponents are playing. And I got it, right? We can't analyze everything, of course. Certainly your opponent can play something like completely unexpected and weird. What do you do then? Well, at least you know your attacking plan, generally speaking, so you're still much better prepared. Plus, I'd recommend that you check out my free masterclass. I'll drop a link down below, which explains how to find attacking moves on your own. Because you can't just memorize everything we're on computers, but you can learn how to play attacking moves, and then you can find it regardless of what your opponent plays. But in this particular case, when they go bishop g4 here, beating your knight, what you want to do is you want to play knight d2. You want to support this knight, because we want to still push basically the same idea, and we need our knight to be there. So after they go knight f6, you play h3, pushing this bishop away. They will usually take here, because if they go back, you can just keep pushing the bishop out, and it's captured. That's, again, beauty of having your opponent on the f-file. Let's take it back. In most cases, they'll just take here. You're a capture, and now they feel completely free to castle, because if they don't, again, you can push e5 anyway, open up the position, and attack the king there along the e-file. So they want to castle. But then again, e5. So they got into the same thing, even though we kind of slightly shifted the order of moves, etc. But ultimately, they got what they deserve. The same Greek gift sacrifice. We push the knight away. As it goes somewhere, you sack the bishop right here. You play knight to g5 check. This time, by the way, notice that the knight is guarded. So they can't take it. The king has to go back, and then queen h5. I mean, if the king goes forward, that's clearly bad. If it goes here, there's this x-ray. So you always have discovered checks like knight takes f7, and you grab the queen, and clearly it's bad for black. So going forward is not an option. If they go here, you can usually just throw your queen out to d3, to g4, and also just go after this exposed king and win the game. That's why they usually go back, but then queen h5, and they lose because they can't guard these two squares. I mean, they can play one intermediate check here, but you go away, and that doesn't really change the main theme, the fact that they can't stop you from being checkmated. Alright, and now let's try another move order. So far it was bishop g4, and to this we responded with knight to d2, just overprotecting our knight over here. What if they go knight f6 here instead? And notice that they haven't castled yet. Therefore, it's a little bit too early for e5 and bishop takes h7, right? So ideally we wish to wait for them to castle. And moreover, we would wish to push them into that direction, right? So of course, you can play different moves. You can just play some prophylactic moves such as h3 or a3 and just wait for them to castle, so that as they do so, you switch back to then e5 and bishop takes h7, right? But if you want to push black into the wrong direction, you can play queen e1 first. And what that does is, first it puts the queen on this e-file, so that if you ever push e5 on the next move, black may feel uncomfortable because of this opposition. And also from here, you can possibly bring the queen to the king side, somewhere to h4 or g3, and you can support your attack there. Notice this fun thing that in all these lines, although black is up a pawn, but quite often they'd wish this pawn to just disappear because it simply blocks their bishop. And again, now this bishop looks like a tall pawn, and this pawn in itself doesn't really make any difference. Okay, what if your opponent castles here? They see that you're maybe setting it up for e5 and some sort of attack here, they castle, and guess what? Now we play e5, all the same stuff. So they trade, and now we attack the knight. You're possibly ready to bring the bishop out as well, if you need to bring more power to your attack. But in most cases, they're going to move the knight away and fail to the same Greek gift sacrifice, knight to g5. And in this case, our queen goes not to h5, but to h4, but that doesn't change anything. Queen h4, and still queen h7, and they're gone. I mean, if they go with the rook there, you still deliver a check, and now you can play rook takes f7 mate. I also want to take a second to address another common question that you guys are asking me often: how to study chess efficiently. Do you need to solve puzzles? Is it okay to play blitz? Should you play against computers? Etc. I actually have another video about this, which you can find right here, where I answer probably most of the questions that you have about efficient chess training. It's called Chess Study Plan to Reach 2000 ELO, and you can check it out if you will.